This got to be.
Thanks again to Jamie for letting us use that Mick McCarthy house mix. We are the Premium FPL podcast, game week 10, week 11 of the podcast, at Premium FPL on Twitter, Premium_FPL on Twitter, sorry. For those not already following us, please follow us for injury updates, talking points, and not just videos of Mindy doing forfeits, but we'll move on to that. So I'm Callum, one half of the podcast, and as always, joined by Mindy.
Yeah. I'm not coming on with a sob story for once this week. Finally, you're the sob story. Can't wait.
Yeah. Would you like to enlighten listeners?
Well, yeah. For people who haven't been following or new to the podcast this week or whatever, we do monthly forfeits. It's been me 2 weeks in a row, which has been awful. 2 months in a row, and it went right down to the wire this week, didn't it? For who was going to lose this month? Very, very close. And Mr. Ollie Watkins proved pivotal. Do you want to talk through the highs and lows of that particular game with Villa West Ham?
Yeah. So going into Villa West Ham, I think I was 5 points behind you, and we both had Grealish and Martinez, and my only different option was Ollie Watkins. And you actually said prior to the game, I hope he misses a penalty. And lo and behold, steps up, whacks the crossbar. And then not only that, 5 minutes later, he puts it in the back of the net, VAR offside, and he was pretty much offside because he had to wrestle the defender off him. So I think that's caused a bit of controversy. I know Grealish isn't happy. I was going to join in with Grealish on the tweets, I think.
I'm just glad that the FPL gods are back on my side. I was starting to think I'm not a spiritual man as such, but I was starting to think that maybe I'd been an absolute horror show in a previous life and fate was just coming for me this year in FPL. But it's good to know that, I'm still somewhat blessed by the FPL gods that they'll do that to Watkins for the sake of my FPL team and for me not to do a forfeit again. We've had some suggestions, haven't we, so far for the forfeits?
There's been a few. Eating a chili was one. There was another one that I can't remember, but there was one that was keeping it festive, which you quite liked.
Yeah, so obviously it's December and we're going to start talking about Christmas. So your brother's one about blending up alcohol and a mince pie and a carrot and making you shot that, and then I think getting you in a Rudolph outfit while you do it or something as well. Right. One of the other suggestions was there was waxing, wasn't there?
Yeah, waxing a chest, which would be interesting.
Maybe. I'm not sure how COVID secure we could make that one at the moment because it's hard to do that without close contact, isn't it?
Yeah, you'd have to get in quite nice and tight.
Might have to save waxing for the summer.
Yeah, for the girls.
We'll see what gets the most reaction. So we've talked through a few of the options. Hopefully, people will say what they're interested in.
If people want to outvote the Christmas movie, then I'll be delighted. I'm not sure about the raw eggs. He claims he's trying to make it like eggnog.
How do you feel about the chili one?
I mean, it's all not great, is it? A raw chili. A whole chili.
I saw you saying something like it's not trial by execution or something. It's just a forfeit. But you were more than happy to watch me almost choke to death. So
yeah, cinnamon's nothing compared to a chili, is it?
Depends what kind of chili we get you.
Yeah, well, I'll be in the voting process for that chili. That's for sure.
I think that's against the rules.
I thought we were trying to do an FPL podcast, not kill me off.
No, it's half FPL podcast, half Jackass. Maybe we should change the branding actually to that. Stand out a bit more.
Killing each other off.
Should we talk a bit about how the rest of the stuff that happened at the weekend, apart from Villa and Watkins and our teams and whatnot?
You go first, since though you outscored me for once.
Yeah, so it was between De Bruyne and Fernandes for my captain, and I went for Fernandes because his away form is just amazing. A stat that I saw last week about him having the most points since he's joined the Premier League, even ahead of Salah, sort of swayed me as well. I know City had the better fixture on paper, but I was talking on the podcast last week about wanting to see City finally put a few goals past the team, which they then duly did before I start looking at captain for City. So yeah, went Fernandes and it worked out. Didn't get bonus points, which you mentioned as well. We were discussing it the weekend, but I think the assist was a bit lucky that he got because he was sort of shooting and there was a deflection. So I was happy just to get the assist and didn't mind not getting the bonus points in the end. My move was Son out for Jota, which paid off this week, but like people who've sold Son various points in the season have regretted it. So prepared for that to buy it later on. And yeah, I guess I was happy with Dallas. Played him this week for his points rather than having him on my bench. And then yeah, most of the other players are things that other people have got, well-owned players. So everyone's got Grealish, haven't they? So yeah, that was story of my week really. What about yourself?
How many points did you get again out of interest?
73.
I thought that would have been first. Where's it come out your mouth?
Oh, 73. Yeah, I went straight into my captain. And then I'm now ranked 1.3 million odd. So gradually chipping away at the rank.
Almost six figures.
Yeah, hopefully by the next month I'll be back into the respectable figures.
Nice. So I got 67, but with a -4, that was 63. My transfers this week were it was Dallas out for Diaz, so that might have ended up costing me as well, actually, even though Diaz got 6 points. And then it was Son out for De Bruyne. So like you say, I'm fully expecting that taking Son out, especially this weekend against Arsenal, which looks like the easiest fixture in the league at the moment. So that'll be interesting. That'll be sat behind my sofa. But it was interesting. De Bruyne, Fernandes, I was having the same debate, and they ended up scoring the same points, which was quite interesting. But yeah, other than that, the midfield kind of really got me there. And I think most people are kind of relying on the midfields. We'll touch on how important the midfield is later. But I had Fernandes, Salah, De Bruyne, Grealish all scoring 10 actually, other than Salah. So that was quite interesting. None of my strikers got a point, like other than playing, which is an interesting talking point as well.
Ollie Watkins did well for you, didn't he?
The DL. Oh, God. 0 points. He could have got about 16 points or something. And yeah. But yeah, Chilwell's ticking along nicely as well, 8 points. Robbo 2, which might be my move this week because he was flagged from last night as well. And I think Klopp mentioned at the weekend that he wanted to take him off if he had 5 subs. So he's obviously running him into the ground a bit. But that's obviously because he's the only defender. So it'd be interesting to monitor that as well.
Yeah, so I think that, Robertson was someone I was potentially looking at for when Liverpool's fixtures turn with Fulham next week. But yeah, I'm not sure about that anymore either, given what you've said. We'll talk more about future moves later.
Yeah, definitely. It's because he's playing every minute and he's just almost running into the ground the way he plays. He can't be playing that intensity every 3 days, but then Liverpool need him. So it's quite interesting.
So what's your rank now?
So my rank at the moment, I went into the top 100,000, so 92,000, which is good. I did peak at 60,000, but then Sunday and Monday, but paid to that.
Yeah, I don't bother checking until the end of the game week, so it's just annoying. So before we go through the running order for the rest of the podcast, just a reminder to follow us on Twitter. That's where you'll see that's where you'll see Callum suffering his first FPL forfeit of his career in the next couple of weeks. So you've got that to look forward to, and subscribe on wherever you're listening to as well.
We've also got YouTube now, which is up and running. That was a test run last week. It seemed to work. So yeah, we're looking to progress that as the podcast and our brand progresses.
Yeah. So if for whatever reason you want to see Callum's ugly mug while you're planning your team, you can now do that via YouTube.
Unfortunately, Mindy's still in pixels. He doesn't have a webcam at the moment, so he looks a bit like a cartoon character.
Yeah, my webcam's a bit dodge. If Santa's listening, can you put webcam on my list, please? Right, running order. So a game's been cancelled, which first time that's happened since restart. So Aston Villa versus Newcastle, which has ramifications for lots of people. 2 or 3 well-owned players going to be out, so we'll talk about that. Christmas coming up. Do we need to think differently about the players we've got on our teams and the transfers we make? And then we'll spend a bit more time than usual in the premium planning segment where we talk through plans for the most expensive players. And also going to talk about is 3-4-3, which is what most people are on at the moment, still the best formation. But yeah, that's that. We're recording on Wednesday, but before the Champions League games have finished, so we don't know of any injuries.
Or Cavani brace.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, we need to wait to see what the FA do with Cavani as well.
Yeah,
I imagine you'll get something for that Instagram post, but yeah, we'll see. Hopefully, we get news of that before the deadline. And yeah, because of that game being cancelled, there's no Friday deadline this week. So until Saturday for making your transfers. Is that it, housekeeping wise?
Yeah, I think that's it. I'm happy to go.
Right. So starting with Aston Villa versus Newcastle, like what players have you got that are missing?
So I've got Martinez, Grealish, and Ollie Watkins, but I think the latter's probably a blessing. But yeah, like you said, everyone's going to have Grealish, and then I'd probably say most teams have at least 2 from that game because obviously Callum Wilson's quite popular as well. Martinez is quite popular, and then Villa defenders are quite popular as well from their start of the season with Konsa and Mings. They were getting clean sheets for fun at the start of the season, so I presume they're still in a lot of teams. So I think it will have ramifications. I've seen a tweet. Quite a few people are tweeting that it might be rearranged to Wednesday, which would change the thinking. But whether that's going to become before the Saturday deadline, I know they have another test on Friday, round of testing. So it'll be interesting to see what happens because of that. And I think this year more than any, we've discussed this before, but I think it's important to hold on to the transfers to the last possible deadline. And I think that Saturday deadline gives you more time this week, which is great.
Yeah, so it's definitely one to keep an eye on for the presses on Thursday and Friday, isn't it? That if the game might be rearranged in the end.
I think they'll be wanting to get it in as quick as possible.
Because yeah, you'd be like so sick and like you'd be fuming, wouldn't you, if you took them out and took them -4 and then they actually are playing. So yeah, don't do that. But should we like work off the assumption for talking about this that it's off, and just talk about what we're planning to do?
Yeah. Do you want to go first? Or?
Yeah. All right. So I've got Grealish and I've got Martinez, and that's it, I think. Yeah. So I'm not really planning to do anything about it. Really, I'm just going to ignore it. I'm happy just to not have a goalkeeper playing this weekend. So yeah, my subkeeper's Forster at 4.0. I did think this might happen at some point. We talked about it like in our season preview pod that maybe there's a bit more argument for into 4.5s, but for your goalkeepers, I just tend to view it that the ceiling for goalkeepers is so low compared to the outfield for any given game week. Unless they save a penalty or rack up huge amount of saves, they're very rare you get double figures from a goalkeeper. So I'm not going to waste. Well, I say waste. I don't want to use a transfer on getting a goalkeeper. I think the amount of points you can gain by making transfers for the outfield players will sort of you'll outpoint that by using a transfer for a goalkeeper in the long term. So yeah, and I'm happy to bench Grealish and play Suchek, however you say it. Because yeah, bit of goal threat from him, playing 90 minutes for West Ham every week. So yeah, I'm just happy to avoid it. What about yourself?
Yeah, I was actually with you. My heart was set on banking the transfer this week. That was all part of the plan. And then obviously the Villa news came out, and I'm not going to sell my goalkeeper for the reasons that you say, Martinez, and I'm actually not going to want to sell my Villa assets just because they're going to have two doubles that are coming up, because obviously they missed the first game of the season and then this one. So say them games get rearranged quite quickly, then you've obviously got, I'll have 3 players there who are going to have an extra game. Extra 2 games. So I think I'm going to keep them. My only other thought is if Robbo does get confirmed, he's not going to play Friday or he's right up against it, then I probably will be tempted to take another -4, which I don't like to do, but to take out Suchek for Jota and Robbo for James, because then that way I've got a team out this weekend. I've got a good team going forward, and then that also allows me to put the Villa assets on the bench. To try and take advantage of the double game weeks that will come. So yeah, if I am to make transfers, that'll be the move, just because to make -4, I have to do it because I don't have the money to go Suchek to Jota. So that's how I do it.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you'd have 2 Chelsea defenders then, would you?
Yeah, which against Leeds, I know Leeds have, on paper, have had the most potent attack, but looking at the Chelsea defence against Spurs at the weekend and the past few games, really, them clean sheets have started to rack up, and they're probably arguably the best defence in the league at the moment, I'd say. The back 5, including Kante, probably the back 6, I'd say, because he obviously does a lot for the defence. And James is quite attacking going forward. He's whipping the crosses in at the weekend, and yeah, he's probably, and that 5 million, he's probably the standout. I know he's 5.1, but just above that, but he's probably the standout option.
Yeah, so actually, just to sort of give a mention to what to do with goalkeepers, like we've both said, we don't really want to spend a transfer on a goalkeeper.
Yeah, no,
but for some people, they might want to, like, not everybody likes going into a game week with 10 players, so not everyone might have the same philosophy, if you want to call it that, or whatever way of playing. And yeah, the Chelsea goalkeeper's interesting because 5.2 for Mendy. And yeah, as you say, they've been racking up the clean sheets now. And yeah, it's a cheap. Is that a cheaper double up than going with James? How much is James?
He's 5.1.
Oh, so no, it's just not below. Cheaper. But I guess you know with Mendy that he's less prone to rotation over Christmas, whereas James,
that's really quite lurking.
Yeah, probably will be. So you might just want to, if you've been thinking about getting rid of Martinez anyway. Some managers might just be looking at this as a reason to move him on. So I think of the keepers, if you're not going to go bargain basement like 4.5, like McCarthy or someone, I'd probably say Mendy. But yeah, you just have to be mindful of the fact that you then can't have 3 Chelsea outfield players, which at some point you might want if Pulisic is fit and firing, and most people have got Chilwell. I just wanted to give a quick mention to Mendy there for people who do want to get rid of the Villa goalkeeper.
I do agree with you. Yeah, he's the standout option. At 5.2, he's not too expensive. Maybe it was 5.5, it'd probably put you off. But I think that's still a nice price. And he's only conceded 1 goal, I think, against Sheffield United since he's been playing, which is you can't ignore that kind of form, really.
And then so what? Like, obviously, I don't think anybody should be thinking of selling Grealish, but Watkins is a bit different now. I think now that he's missed a pen, and you'd think he'd be off them given his record now on pens. So that does take away some of the appeal of him as an asset if he's lost pens. So that would be another one where maybe if you are wanting like another, if you've got your eyes on another striker, and having Watkins means you've not got a full team out this week, that could be another one to consider. Have you had any thoughts on long term what you want to do with Watkins? Are you still happy with him?
Yeah, obviously, yeah. Happy's probably not the right word, but he's still, at the end of the day, he's still racking up the chances. I think him and Bamford are competing with all the premium strikers, midfielders, to put it that way. But yeah, I just think because there's a lack of any other striker really emerging. I think Danny Ings might change that when he comes back. But other than Kane, who's blanked the last 2 weeks, there's not much appeal for the strikers out there. So I'm happy to keep over the Christmas period because you like to think he's probably nailed still in that 11. I'm not sure when Wesley's coming back, but I think for that reason alone, I'll probably keep him. And then Calvert-Lewin has some tough fixtures as well coming up. So I think strikers is a tricky one. Like midfield now, there's a template emerging. Obviously with Salah, De Bruyne, Fernandes, Grealish, and Jota. And I think most teams are going to have them 5 now, which kind of puts less pressure on the forward line, but we'll see how it develops. And like I say, with the 2 doubles that are coming up, I'm going to try and keep him and see when they're going to get rearranged too.
Yeah, fair. So yeah, we'll talk more about the midfield, especially the abundance of premiums in the midfield now when we get to the premium segment. But yeah, I guess the main takeaway from that point, from before we move on to the next bit of the podcast, is definitely wait to see that there's no news on when that fixture is going to be rearranged before you start chopping and changing. Yeah, I think that's it from me on that, unless you've got anything else to add.
No, I think I've said what I need to there.
Cool.
Moving on to Christmas planning. So obviously the rotation starting to happen now. Obviously Sterling and Cancelo for City were the big victims last week because there was lots of teams bringing them 2 in. So yeah, we just wanted to discuss maybe is it time to like focus on the assets who we know are nailed? Obviously Kane's a bit of an injury out, but players like him who we think aren't going to get dropped over the Christmas period. Do we start to look towards that now?
Yeah, so I was already thinking about this last week, which is why I took out Son for Jota rather than losing Kane, because I didn't want to have 2 Spurs players through all these horrible fixtures they've got. And yeah, I just thought Kane's more likely to play more minutes over Christmas because he's relied on to defend set pieces as well as for what he does at the top of the pitch and all that. So yeah, him. I think Grealish, we know that he's going to play more than most players over that period because he's just the talisman for Villa. De Bruyne is looking assured for Premier League starts. He didn't play in the Champions League yesterday, did he?
No, I think he's nailed, yeah.
So, and Bamford, I was a bit worried about him, but he looks to be a 90-minute man. For some reason, Bielsa doesn't seem too hot on Rodrigo yet. So I think Bamford looks safe, and Fernandes as well looks like his goal involvement for United, like the amount of assists and goals he's involved in. I'm not sure Ollie can risk losing him for too many matches. In terms of my team, Jota's probably one I'll be worried about come Boxing Day because I imagine he'll be rotated a lot. But I just think at the price, and then with the injuries that Liverpool have got, I'm happy to take my chances on that over Christmas. Are there any players in your team that you are worried about now with Christmas coming?
Luckily, the players you mentioned there, I have the majority of them, and that was my thinking from the start of the season. I want players who are going to be nailed every week. Just to touch on Jota, that's the reason that I might get him in this week. I noticed he was brought off in the Champions League, whereas Salah and Mane were kept on, which I thought was quite interesting for the weekend. It kind of makes you feel that he's assured for a start, whereas the other 2 might be dropped. Are
you sure you're not just trying to copy my team so I can't catch up to you?
That could be possible. No, I've always played FPL where I don't want to not have the players who I think would harm me most. And Jota, he's got Wolves coming up, who his former team is going to want to prove a point to Espirito Santo, because I know he wasn't first choice towards the end of his tenure there last year. So he want to prove a point. And then Fulham coming up, which is obviously quite an open game, good for him. But just the players you said there, like City-wise, De Bruyne and Diaz, I think, is nailed. But then he played 90 last night, whereas Laporte was on the bench. So maybe not even he's nailed. So De Bruyne's probably the one.
It looks a bit of a mess now at City, apart from De Bruyne, doesn't it?
I don't think you can even trust Diaz. Jesus might be emerging as the one if Aguero's injury is worse than feared. I know I've not said anything, so he might be the next route into that City team because you kind of want to take advantage for them fixtures, but you just don't know how.
So yeah, with everything that you've just said, I'm thinking this good run of City fixtures and it coincided with Christmas congestion and Pep already talking about rotating and all that stuff. I'm sort of thinking I'm now just gonna be happy with De Bruyne, just leave that as my City for my City assets.
Yeah, but with them fixtures, you kind of want to have another, but it's just I've seen a stat the other day actually that Mahrez has started all but one of the Premier League games this season. So obviously he got 20 points at the weekend. Whether he could be another option as well. But like you say, you kind of you've got that 40 back of your head every week whether they're going to start or not. Which
the other thing is that I definitely don't want another City midfielder just because my midfield's already packed with players getting points already. Like I'd have to take out like Grealish or Jota for Mahrez, which I don't want to do. So if I was going to get another City player, it'd be a defender or a forward. And yeah, I'm just not sure that they're all going to be playing.
Yeah, Kyle Walker's another one actually who's played every game, but yeah, he's a bit pricey. So you're kind of having that slight rotation risk, but you're also having the price as well. So yeah, I know where you're thinking, but it's quite tricky when you see the fixtures as good as they are.
Yeah, I'd say to people now, when you're bringing players in, I know most people only get nailed on players anyway, but I think it's time to factor in also like if a manager wanted to rest this player, is there a decent alternative? So yeah, because that kind of emphasizes how managers view players over Christmas. Like if there isn't a decent option for them to rotate that player, then they are probably going to play more minutes than other players. So like there isn't someone in the Villa team who can do what Grealish does for the team. So yeah, he's not an option to be rested and rotated. So yeah, I'd try to think about that like with the Christmas fixtures in mind. But the other thing is that yeah, it's not really something that's within nothing in fantasy is really within our control. But it's I wouldn't like stress too much about it. Like I'd say for most of the decent options, like it'll be fairly similar. Like the amount, like they'll all probably lose like 30 to 45 minutes over that period where there's 2 or 3 games in 9 days. You just got to be as careful as you can. The players that are nailed and talismans and whatever. I think, yeah, just think about that. And then for the captain, I think if your player doesn't play say if like Fernandez misses like half of the game on Boxing Day and then the fixture the week after, I'd then be thinking like, well, he's had some rest, so I can be sure about captaining him the next week. Whereas with De Bruyne, I'm a bit worried about even just having De Bruyne over some of this period because say like game week 13, where City you've got West Brom. If De Bruyne has played 90 against United the week before, and then City have Southampton away a few days later after that West Brom fixture, how confident am I of him getting 90 in a on paper easier game where Pep might think he's more of a, if there's a game where you can maybe rest De Bruyne for a little bit, it would be that one, wouldn't it, at home to West Brom? But with a fantasy head on, that's the game where you want him to captain him.
I think De Bruyne personally is untouchable just because they've rested him every Champions League game. Well, especially since they've qualified. And I think he'll get rested the cup games. And especially if the title's still on and Liverpool start to falter a bit, I just don't think City can play without De Bruyne. Personally, I think
even against West Brom.
Yeah, I honestly think that. I think every other player is probably, you can bring someone else in, but if you take De Bruyne out, the City have no one else who can replicate that.
Right.
Personally, that's my personal opinion anyway. Because when Sterling's missing, we've got Torres now, who obviously isn't as good, but he's right up there. Whereas De Bruyne missed, they've got no one who can touch him. But I could be wrong. But personal opinion, I do think that he'll play more minutes than not.
Okay. So yeah, just have a think about like the factors we've mentioned for the players you've got, and like when you bring in a player in, just be a bit more mindful. Like check how many minutes they've been getting. Are they definitely the preferred option? And is there a comfortable distance between them and the next best option the manager has? And then you can you've done what you can then in terms of being conscious of them getting the most minutes over the busy period. I think that's probably it for that. Should we move on to premium planning segment?
Yeah.
So yeah, we've talked about City a bit already. So yeah, they've got the best fixtures, haven't they, for the premium assets you want to target. I'd say if you don't have De Bruyne, get him. Don't know if you've got anything to add on that, but yeah. Watching that game at the weekend, I felt quite.
He could have had about 20 points. It was ridiculous.
Like he had that shot that pinged off the crossbar or the post in the last minute.
Yeah, it's mental.
So I think Fernandes could have had more points as well last week. So yeah, I think those two are sort of. I'm not thinking about getting rid of them from my team anytime soon.
Just to touch on Fernandes, I've seen a nice little stat on him as well. So he's second, past 5 game weeks, he's second for most chances, just behind Bamford, and he's highest by quite some distance for like creating chances. So I think he's irreplaceable, as you say.
Yeah, so at the start of the season, when he was playing deeper, and parts of last season as well, like his points were coming from, being on corners, being on set pieces, taking pens. Whereas now, the stats you've just mentioned, they suggest that he's going to be getting even more points from open play. So
he almost felt quite lucky start of the season that he was still getting in some. If that's the right way of putting it, it felt like he'd be getting them points and be like, where they come from. Whereas now it's almost shifted to be like he could get double that. So yeah, I think that double pivot's very definitely helping him behind him.
And so yeah, I mean, while we're sort of talking about those, should we just say like of all the big players, like who are the best for you to have? Because it's hard to fit everyone.
I think them two, as you say, are top 2 for me right now.
How far behind is Salah though? Because like Salah's got Fulham coming up, so
I think he's touching. Yeah. I mean, I'm for them two right now. Well, going off De Bruyne's last game, but then like you say, Salah. I always want to have Salah, but yeah.
I think now that it's tricky. I think with this game week in mind, the fact that do you want to captain De Bruyne at Fulham, that puts De Bruyne ahead. But then next week, when Liverpool have got Fulham, I'd move De Bruyne down the pecking order below Salah, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because I think you could go through the next 4 or 5 over Christmas and over New Year, just rotating captains between like Fernandes and Salah if you wanted to, looking at it. And say if there are people who are of the same sort of slight worry as me that maybe De Bruyne could get rested just with Pep roulette, you can't rule it out. I tend to agree with you that, City just looked so much worse without and Pep wouldn't, but
he might get one game off or something, but whereas I think he'll play most of them not.
So yeah, I just think for that reason, once this game week's out of the way, once you've captained De Bruyne against Fulham, which I think is what you and I are both going to do this week, I'd move him down that order after that. Where does like Kane and so on? I guess they're now further down the pecking order than they were earlier in the season.
Although the game at the weekend, I almost think Arsenal in tatters is almost a better fixture than Fulham, a quite resurgent Fulham. Weirdly thinking, I wouldn't advocate captaining them, but I could see Kane and Son outscoring De Bruyne this weekend.
Interesting.
Yeah, which was something I wouldn't have thought 2 weeks ago. Just because how bad Arsenal were. And Monday night, they were pretty shocking.
One thing that's slightly concerning me with Kane is that obviously I knew that his returns would drop over the harder fixtures. But I don't think he had a shot in the box against Chelsea, or he didn't have a shot in the box on target. So, and that's something like he always keeps that ticking over usually. So yeah, it's just whether they just switch back to how they play against on paper weaker teams for the Arsenal game, and it all just comes back. It'd be an interesting one to watch that. There's a flag on Kane at the moment as well, which people have to factor in. I'm sure that might just be Mourinho starting the mind games early for the.
Remember what happened last time? He said Son was injured.
Yeah, so don't. Yeah, it's one to be wary of that. Don't take what Mourinho says at face value all the time. Well, any of the time. What else do we have to say about the premium options? There's something else I wanted to mention here.
I think for me, them three are standout. It's whether most teams have three, maybe four, because you have Kane as well, don't you? So yeah, the fourth one's probably up for grabs. Really, there's probably an abundance of players. Kind of Vardy was supposed to be the one for the next four, and then he blanked at Monday night. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see what that fourth one will be.
Well, I think the problem with four is that to have four, you kind of have to start making too many sacrifices. Like my team value is all right, but to fit in Salah, Kane, Fernandes, and De Bruyne, I start having to make I'd have to consider maybe downgrading Chilwell or something, which I don't really want to do.
Yeah, I won't be in a rush to do that anytime soon.
So that's why I think one of Kane or De Bruyne will have to go over the next two for me to get Salah back in, because I definitely want to captain Salah against Fulham next week. So week after next, sorry. So yeah, that's the decision I've got to make. So, and some of that boils down to what formation I end up going with. So we'll talk about that now. With all the premiums that are performing in midfield, and even players like Jota and Grealish in the sort of mid-price bracket, it has made me think would getting rid of Kane and going down to a bargain basement striker that would be on my bench every week, and just having 5 solid options in midfield, playing 3-5-2 all the way through to the new year, will that be the best way to sort of have best flexibility to be able to move between De Bruyne, Salah, Fernandes, Son if he comes back into form? I'm thinking, as you said before, what the budget strikers that we were all sort of talking about a couple of weeks ago, Calvert-Lewin's dropped off a bit. Luka Dean being out harms him a little bit. I think half of his goals have come from. That's not that's not a stat you can quote me on, but just from watching games and stuff, it seems that so many chances for Calvert-Lewin come from Luka Dean crosses that him being out for a while does affect the creativity. A lot of his goals have been coming from headers that were crosses into the box. So he's one that, I'm not looking at getting rid of him anytime soon, but it just lessens the amount that I'm interested in terms of the whole striker pool. Watkins losing penalties is another one. So I think, losing Kane and then just having Calvert-Lewin and Bamford for now, and then having Salah, Fernandes, Jota, Grealish and De Bruyne as our midfield for the next 4 to 5 weeks might be something I think about. So I need to make a decision on that in the next week or two. But yeah, I don't know if you've had any thoughts of switching formations.
Yeah, purely because of the Villa game being called off, and obviously as talked about bringing Jota and James in, and that would give me a big three at the back of James, Chilwell, Diaz, who I wouldn't probably change any week really. I know I've Walker Peters on the bench, but that would be looking to have that three most weeks, and then I will have the power five if I do that. Like you say, I think De Bruyne, Salah, Fernandes, Jota and Grealish, they're pretty much the standout options at the moment. I know quite a few people still have Son, but that's probably a legacy from previous game weeks because I think his ownership was about 60%.
A legacy? Like we're talking operating systems?
No, well, I mean, that 60% isn't 60% of managers want him right now. That's people who've got him in 3-4 weeks ago. And then, I kind of want, whether it's Kane or someone else, I kind of want that premium striker to emerge up front because then I can have Bamford and another one. At the moment, I would have Bamford, Watkins and Calvert-Lewin, and that would kind of leave me with having to bench one every week, which I'd rather have the money tied up in a premium than having to bench one every week. And I do think, as you say, Calvert-Lewin's goals are drying up. Whether it is time to move him on, because after Burnley at the weekend, I think they have quite a tough run. And if the form doesn't improve, it's quite a lot of money to have. And I think you've got to be clever with the fixture swings and stuff. Obviously, we talked on it in the past, but you've got to be quite clever when to jump off assets. I know I jumped off Kane and Son, and it's worked out so far. Whether it works out next few weeks, but I think you shouldn't be like keeping a player just because like his ownership. Calvert-Lewin, what is it, like 70%? But if he's not scoring, then
yeah. The only disadvantage I can see from having 3-5-2 over 3-4-3 is that the cheap midfielder that you have to make 3-4-3 work, like for example me, Souček, the options are around that 4.5 to 5 million bracket for the fifth midfielder. They're better than the third striker. So to make 3-5-2 work, I'd have to transfer Kane down to someone like Brewster or someone around 5 billion. And they're just all a bit sketchy. Like, fair enough they're on your bench, but you do need your bench sometimes, as has been shown recently. So that's what I need to weigh up in my head. Does having the power five, as you call it, in midfield outweigh the element of having Dross as my my bench player? Because there will be a week over Christmas where that third striker that I downgrade Kane to will have to play, not maybe by choice, but just by a player being rested for a whole game and they come on. So that's the thing I'm going to have to think about when I make that decision.
You mentioned the 4.5 midfielder there being more options than the attacker, but I'd go as far to say probably the defense 4.5 is the strongest out of midfield. I think there's a lot more options around the 4.5 defense than midfield and forward. So whether that can be your first sub and then more value elsewhere.
Yeah, true. That's something to think about for people. This time where all the midfielders are firing, it's something to think about. Like, what do you want to do with your formation? Shall we talk about our transfers then this week? We're running out of time. We'll have to be quick.
Yeah, so I'm either going to hold and have Souček come in for like you with the United game, or I'm going to take out Souček for Jota and Robertson for James, which either way I'm going to have 10 out. So whether I do make that -4, probably come down to the wire really and listen to the pressers, see when that Villa game's rearranged to, if it gets announced or if Robbo's back or injured. I think that'll probably sway it.
Yeah, and no U-turns on captain De Bruyne. Is that locked?
No, I've not even... No. Yeah, locked.
Right.
Who do United got? West Ham. Yeah, no chance. Locked.
Yeah, I would say that, Fernandez's away form is just ridiculous. So for anyone that does want to go against the green.
Yeah.
For anyone that does want to go against the green. But I'm also not moving. I'm not risking I don't fall into the whole ownership thing as much as you when it comes to captains. But I think this week, so many people will be on De Bruyne. And I also think, even without ownership, I just think that his points in that game is higher than Fernandez's, just because if Fulham don't get an early goal or something to hold on to and City get an early goal, it could just turn into a bloodbath. I think that was kind of why it didn't really work out for Leicester Monday, because Fulham got the early goal and it's sort of the dynamic just changed quite a bit depending on that. Whereas you'd like to think City would get the other goal in that game. My transfers. I'm probably going to hold as well because that was my plan was to have 2 transfers going into next week when Liverpool play Fulham. So this Villa stuff hasn't really affected my team so much, apart from the fact I'm not going to have a goalkeeper. So I'm just going to hold, hopefully, and then get Salah in next week. And that would either be for De Bruyne or by doing Kane down to a budget midfielder and then Souček to Salah.
So, hang on, who's copying whose team here?
What are you on about? As soon as I mentioned 3-5-2, you were like, oh yeah, me too. How am I copying you?
Look, honestly, I had that in mind, bringing in Jota.
Yeah, whatever. So questions. We've had a couple of actual reasonable questions from the long-term joker Oz, who always sends in absolute dross questions. So
Better make the most of it.
Yeah. So Fabio Silva or Traore for Wolves. Traore has been awful for points this season. Actually, just reading that question again, it is pretty bad. He mentions a player and then says, "Oh, but that player's awful." So you just answered your own question. But the first half of the question, Fabio Silva's interesting because he's someone I've looked at actually for my Kane downgrade. Because
How much is it?
He's 5.2. So with Jimenez being out, I don't think he'll get 90, but he'll get a lot more minutes than he has been getting, won't he?
I can't see him going without a striker.
Yeah, it's just whether they could move Podence or Neto as a false nine or something. But yeah, you'd like to think that Fabio Silva will start getting a lot more minutes. So yeah, he could be a good one for people who are looking to make the 3-5-2 switch because Brewster's just looks so unappealing. So yeah, like Fabio Silva is worth looking at for that question. And then second question from Orion was Kane injured for Europa, but is that saving for Arsenal again? Take him out or not? So yeah, we touched on that Kane injury. I just think that's Mourinho mind games. I don't think there's a point in the game where Kane did get injured last week, was there?
No, and I think if you've stuck with Kane for the last two blanks, then Arsenal coming up, that's the game you want. I know he's got a fantastic record in North London derby, hasn't he? And yeah, Arsenal look disarray. So if I do have Kane, I would be holding him personally.
Yeah, the only reason I'd get rid of Kane is if you don't have De Bruyne or Salah for the captain the next 2 weeks, is what I'd say. Because you're not going to captain Kane the next two, are you? Whereas you do want to captain a City player or a Liverpool player next week. So yeah, I'd hold Kane unless you're switching to 3-5-2 to do other stuff, or if you don't have the captain that you want. Yeah, that's it for this week. We've had to rush through a little bit just because of time constraints, but back to full flow in long rants and whatnot next week. Anything to add before we call it a day?
No, I enjoyed that. Hopefully the listeners do. Remember to subscribe to us on whatever you're listening to. Yeah,
and keep the forfeit suggestions and forfeit chat rolling in. Callum's loving it.
Yeah.
All right. See you later.
All right. Catch you in a bit.